Okay, now we are going to learn about Indian Independence Act of 1935. So before seeing this topic, I just want to tell some brief things about this Indian Independence Act 1935. So what are the conditions at that point of time? As I have said in the previous video, like in 1919 Act, there was a provision to appoint a commission which would be reviewing the implementation of 1919 on the ground level in India. So as I have mentioned, the name of the commission is Simon Commission, and its basically mandate is in 1919 Act. After 10 years, it has to come to India and to review the implementation of 1919 Act, which means 1929. But it just came 2 years earlier only. In 1927, the Simon Commission has arrived in India, and it has studied the implementation at ground level, what kind of government regulations are going and what improvements need to be done in 1919 Act. So these kind of things it has suggested. So based on the suggestions on this Simon Commission, the Act of 1935 has been passed. So whatever provisions you would be reading in 1935 Act, these are some add-ons, some developments in the previous Act of 1919. So just keep that in mind, then you would be relating it very well, and you would be remembering it in like a story format. Okay, let's get into that point of time. So the importance of this is it has worked to completely make a responsible government of India, which means till now what used to have is exploitation was more while British is ruling India, because British are more concerned about Britishers who are staying in Britain, but not of Indians, because they treat Indians as their subjects which they are ruling. But by the agitations of our freedom fighters, they have said that we want something which is better to our Indians also. So this is a second milestone. The first one are 1919 Act. So the second one is this 1935, which is keeping some provisions to make the government more better. So for this only, it would be some lengthy, as it is mentioned here, that this is having 321 sections and 10 schedules. Schedules, this term you would be hearing schedules. If I would be noting and I mean to say, if I'm making a note, if I'm making a constitutions, I would be having some add-ons. These kind of add-ons are known as schedules. So if something is directly mentioned in schedule, it means it is an add-on to the constitution. It is also part of the constitution, but it is an add-on. And the sections are like articles. I mean to say Article 1 deals with this, Article 2 deals with this, Article 3 deals with this. Like this kind of thing, 321 sections has been given, means it has elaborately covered about many of the things in government and governance. So this is very lengthy, and it is also called as, our constitution is also based on many provisions which this Act 1935 provides. So just let's see other features of it. It has asked for an all India federation consisting of provinces and princely states as units. While I was mentioning about at the starting of 1919 only, I have given you a brief about what is known as princely states, what are known as provinces, because I know at some point of time this would be an interesting and important topic. So I just stressed upon it. So now it is easy for you to understand it. See, all India federation means, let me give you a diagrammatic view. As I have mentioned, we used to have India. Pardon me for my diagram skills, but it's just to explain you. If we consider this as our India in British times, so we used to have these provinces and we used to have these princely states. These all used to function separately as an individual units. There was a correlation, but not a coordination between these all things. They used to have their own kind of governance and governments. So what this 1935 Act has done is, it wanted to create an all India federation, which means to say these all will be united and would be controlled from here. I mean to say they would be having autonomy, but a central kind of, if a decision is taken, we would be legislating, we'll be deliberating with this point, we'll be asking for their suggestion, we'll be asking for their suggestion, we'll be asking for their suggestions. Such kind of all India federation was to be made, which also involves the princely states and also the provinces. So this has been proposed in this 1935 Act. Why I am stressing upon this point? Because if you see in present India, we have a federal all India federation. Our states are united. We work in a unison. We cooperate with each other. So such kind of basement has been provided from 1935 Act. So remember this point. This is one of the important point because you would be knowing that the Act has divided the powers between center and units in terms of three lists: the federal list, the provincial list, and the concurrent list. So I just do not to stress on these items how many are there, because these kind of questions doesn't arrive. So don't keep your energy focusing upon knowing each and every detail about this thing. Just but the concept is very important to know as an aspirant, also as a citizen, that we are having three lists. Like I have mentioned, the federal list, the provincial list, and the concurrent list. In independent India, if I want to say in seventh schedule, I would be explaining it better while we will be dealing with constitution. But right now, I just wanted to give you a brief so that it would be ingrained into your mind well. So in seventh schedule of our constitution, the items are divided into three terms: central list, state list, and concurrent list. Which means there are some items like I have mentioned, like police, like military, like revenue, the taxation system, and the water sanitation and disaster management. If we have to have coordination of dealing with all of these things, we need to see which things are better managed by the center, which things are better managed by the states, which things require both cooperation of center and state, and we need to divide lists. We need to divide the subjects according to this list, right? So this has been done by 1935 Act. As far as 1935 only, they have thought of this idea that it is better to divide subjects into central list, provincial list, and also concurrent list, which also requires concurrent means concurrence, which means the state and also the center, both of them needs to be involved in decision making. So this kind of provision is directly emanating from Indian Independence Act 1935. So while I will be dealing with constitution in detail, you just keep in mind, okay, in seventh schedule we have just separated these kind of things, and it is directly the result of 1935 Act which has proposed this kind of provision in our administration, in our governance. Okay, so very important. Just remember this kind of separation of three lists has been provided by 1935 Act. Let's get into other features. So while I was dealing about the central list, the state list, the concurrent list, it cannot happen that government knows everything, right? Some new things could be emerging, like if I want to say the e-commerce, the e-trade, which are newly emerging kind of thing. But there needs to be some kind of law should be implemented upon them, right? This needs to be separated into central list or state list or concurrent list. If some subjects are not kept in central list or state list or concurrent list, then we need to have some residuary powers, which means if a subject is not falling under these three headlines, then we need to keep some authority or to govern it. So at that point of time, the residuary powers were given to viceroy, which means if a subject is not falling particularly under those three lists, then the viceroy is legitimized to have the act upon those subjects. But now in Indian independent India, I would explain you that the residuary powers are under the hands of union. I mean to say the center. It has abolished the diarchy in the provinces and introduced provincial autonomy. Very important and very interesting point, as I have explained clearly what do you mean by diarchy. And I have also said diarchy has been implemented at the provinces. But now in 1935 Act, what they are doing is they are removing this diarchy at the provinces. They are saying that okay, diarchy is not, Simon Commission might have recommended them that diarchy is not working well at provinces, just remove it. So they have removed it and they have provided autonomy, which means those legislatures who are in the legislative councils of the provinces, they are involved in legislating upon their own items. They have those autonomy, which means if they want to control a law, they can do it. Those Indians who are involved, they can do it. But in prior times, in diarchy, what has happened? We have kept some reserved items which can only be ruled by the governor of the province and his executive council. But now the diarchy has been abolished from provinces. So the governor was also required to act on advice of ministers and responsible to the provincial legislature. Very important point. because the government is an executive who is implementing these policies which are framed. But what happens is, to implement these policies, we also need to have some questioning authority, right? Like, why did you do like that? We are having a law like this, but why are you doing something against the law? So some questioning authority needs to be there, right? So this governor is now directly responsible to the advice of the ministers. So these ministers, as I have said, by limited franchise, some people elect these ministers, and they are sitting in the legislative councils, and they make viceroy responsible to them. This is the idea behind this. And this Indian Independence Act of 1935 has came into effect in 1937, and it didn't last little longer. It just discontinued in 1939. And I also want to give some add-on, which is given generally in history, that while the All India Federation has been proposed in 1935, what has happened is some princely states were against it. They have said, no, we are not going to join the unitary features. So they have restrained themselves, so that All India Federation never came into existence as according to 1935 Act. Okay, right? So this also you need to see that I have said they have abolished diarchy at the provinces, but they have adopted diarchy at the center. UPSC could confuse you by rotating these kind of terms, like, okay, they have abolished at diarchy at the center in 1935 Act. No, they have abolished diarchy at provinces in 1935 Act, which were granted in 1919 Act. In 1935 Act, they are providing diarchy at the center, which means the subjects will be treated as transferred and reserved, and reserved subjects will be having under the council of executive council and viceroy, and the transferred subject will be under the council of ministers, who would be having an authority to ask it. Okay, the federal subjects are also divided into reserved subjects and transferred subjects. It's just explaining the diarchy concept. Okay, another important provision is, I have mentioned that in 1919 Act, bicameralism has been provided at the center, which means there have been two houses set up at the central level. But in 1935 Act, the bicameralism has been introduced in 6 out of 11 provinces, which means to say, you just remember those provinces like Bengal, Bombay, Madras, Bihar, Assam, and United Provinces. United Provinces means some governing bodies are together. They are like northwestern frontier at Punjab and Pakistan. There is called as United Provinces, northwestern frontier. So that kind of provinces, they were granted bicameralism, by which I mean, now at this provinces, there will be two houses. As I have mentioned, in our states, some states have legislative assembly and legislative council. It is not mandatory. Not every state has it, but some states has it. So similar wise, bicameralism, out of the 11 provinces which we have at that point of time, 6 were granted bicameralism by 1935. So remember this point also. In 1919, bicameralism is granted at unitary center, and now bicameralism is granted at princely states. Okay, so as I have mentioned to you that in 1909, the trend of separate electorates has been started. It has been given to Muslims to have a separate electorate, so that only Muslims would be electing Muslims. Okay. After that, what has happened in 1919? The trend of separate electorate has been extended. It also involved Christians and Europeans and Anglo-Indians and others. Okay. So similar trend has been extended because the Simon Commission, which has came in 1927, it has said that, okay, just extend the separate electorate, just give it to other people also. So people, the Indians, the freedom fighters, they were saying that do not have separate electorate because it would be dividing our society further. But it might be the intention of British that if we divide them on the basis of electorate, then we could govern them better, because if united, they would be a mighty force to handle. So what they have done, they have just extended the principle of communal electorates to include the depressed classes like the scheduled castes and women and labor workers. So just remember this point of time, that what in 1909, whom did they give separate electorate? In 1919, whom did they give? And 1935, whom did they extended the separate electorate, because these could be an confusing aspects while you are learning, but I know that after seeing this you would be easily remembering whom they have provided. So it also abolished the Council of India established by the Government of India Act 1858. So what is law? Law is just like we would be implementing some kind of rules so that to see how the government is functioning. After some kind of utility served by this law, if the time permits, we would be abolishing those laws, right? So similar kind of Councils of India Act. While I was dealing with Indian Act 1858, I have said that there has been Council of India has been established by that act. In 1935, what they have done is they have removed that Council of India. So if they confuse you at any point of time, like Council of India was abolished by which act, or in 1920 in 1919 Council of India was abolished, do not get trapped, because in 1935 they have abolished Council of India. So going to next slide, we have to see that Reserve Bank of India has been established by 1935 Act. Very interesting, right? The Reserve Bank of India, which we are having, has been established by this Act of 1935 prior to our independence also. And the Federal and Provincial and Joint Public Service Commission. I hope while I was dealing with the 1919 Act, I have said that there has been a Central Public Service Commission has been established, like UPSC, which is not currently. Now you have to see that the federal, which means central, and provincial, which means state. Like if you write any kind of exam, like state exams like APPSC, MPPSC, TPPSC. So who conducts these exams? These are conducted by state public service commissions, right? At this point of time, in 1935 only, they have established a federal, provincial, and joint public service commission public service commission bodies. You know the function of these bodies is to conduct examinations for entrance of civil services. So this also established a federal court which was set up in 1937. So the main things which you need to remember in 1935 Act, as I summarize this 1935 is the diarchy which has been involved in 1919. Where did this differentiate into? And the bicameralism which was established at the center, where did it move into? And the separate electorate which I was mentioning, where did it went into? And the federation, the All India Federation, which it has proposed an unique and wonderful idea, did it come into place or not? It didn't. And also the separation of the lists into 3 lists, which I have mentioned, you need to remember about 1935 Act. This is very lengthy act, but the important provisions for our constitutions are this.